Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the UC's annual webinar for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAAP, or GAD. I'm Judy Ty, Director of Application Engineering, and over here at OP. And I'm very thrilled to welcome you all today. We have a very exciting lineup planned, but I'll get to those in just a moment. First, a few administrative details. First, the webinar is being live captioned. And we also have some ASL interpreters who are being spotlit the entire time. If you do not see them, please do rejoin the webinar on a larger screen. And let's see. We will also be recording. We are recording this webinar, and we will send out the recording after the webinar is over and after the video has been captioned. And pops any questions into the Q&A, and the panelists will help you out, or they'll save it for the Q&A session at the very end. All right, let's get started. I am thrilled that Molly Greek, Accessibility Champion and Chief Information Officer over here at OP, could join us today to kick off the webinar events. And with that, I'll hand off the mic to Molly.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for asking me to come and speak to a topic I'm actually really passionate about. You know, several years back when I first went to a presentation where Judy was there, and she was talking about accessibility and its importance, it was really an awakening for me. I had been involved with, ensuring things were accessible in my prior position at UC Davis Health, but I didn't really understand the scope, the scale, and the importance. To be honest, I was following sort of a policy that talked about the importance of making things accessible, but I didn't understand really how it impacted people, how it impacted our students, how it impacted the public, how it impacted our staff. So since that presentation, where I really understood what was really at stake, it really changed my view. It changed how I came to be a really strong supporter of accessibility, not just at UCOP, but at the entire UC and anywhere that I'm touching, trying to make sure that that is something that is valued, that is prioritized, and really educating others. And I truly believe that the more we educate others on this topic, then then other people sort of get it. Then it becomes not this compliance thing that we have to do. It becomes something that's part of the UC mission, and part of something that we're proud of and that we're doing together. Some of the things that really sort of made me think about this too is it's not some small percentage of the population that has a disability or some sort of accessibility need. It's lots of people. In fact, it's us. One of the things that Judy really made me think about is, what if you had a hand injury? Say you're out playing tennis and you hurt your hand. Well, now you're one of those folks who has some sort of a temporary disability or maybe a permanent disability, where do I want to be able to keep doing my job and be able to continue being valued in the work that I do? Well, sure. Putting yourself into that position makes you realize that all of us may at some point in our lives need accessible content and accessible opportunities in order to do our jobs or learn something new, or go online to a bank, be able to make a deposit. Lots of different areas there. So I think that what I would hope all of you come away from, and I'll bet a lot of people, just the fact that you're here, probably many of you are already accessibility champions and supporters already. But for those of you who might be new to this and maybe looking at this only through a compliance lens, I would really encourage you to look at this through a lens of it's our mission, through a lens of this could be me or, someone in my, people temporarily, people permanently. And what we really want to make sure is that what we're doing is we're making it so that, especially those of you who really understand it from a diversity perspective, we want all people to reach their full potential. So what is, that means whatever they want to do, whatever they can do. And in order to do that, we don't give the same thing to everyone. We give to everyone what they need in order to reach their full potential. So really accessibility ties so much into one of our really closely held tenets, which is we know we serve a diverse population, and what we want is for all of those people to reach their full potential. And having accessibility as central to what we do enables that.
All right, thank you, Molly.
So just to kind of hand off to you, Judy.
Yep.
It's really great, by the way, to see such a huge population online who's interested in this topic, and I really wish I could stay with all of you to go on, but I do have to move on to something that I wasn't able to change. But thank you so much for allowing me to come and say a few words today. I am the wind beneath your wings.
Thank you so much. Right, on the screen, I am sharing a list of today's speakers. We've just heard Molly's welcome message, and coming up next is a panel discussion about the local accessibility initiatives with Andrew Burke from UC Irvine, Suzanne Harrison from UC Berkeley, Jim Phillips from UC Santa Cruz, and Jill Walters from UCSF. Lucy Greco from UC Berkeley will moderate that panel. Jill Walters will continue by providing accessible PowerPoint tips, and Rachel Lee Bellafato from UC Merced will share how to ensure accessibility in the classroom. Brian McNeely from UCOP will talk about leading laterally and how he works to influence accessibility. And Wai-Yi Kwong from UC Berkeley will talk about busting the digital glass ceiling of inaccessibility. And finally, Lucy Greco will demonstrate Stardew Valley, which is a farming simulation video game with an accessibility mod. Douglas Harriman will proctor the Q&A session, and then I'll close out with some parting words. And with that, I'll hand the baton to Lucy Greco.
Thank you, Judy. I truly appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to UC on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It's the one day that people in my industry really want to reach out and talk to the community. And this is my opportunity to do that with my friends at UC. Today, our panelists are Jill Walters, Jim Phillips, Suzanne Harrison, and Andrew Burke. And these are just 4 of the top people in accessibility at UC. These 4 people represent their campuses, but more importantly, represent the work that is being done at their campuses. So to get started, my first question to each of you is, what are you doing at your campus to foster accessibility? And we will start with Jill.
Thanks, Lucy. Every quarter, we have check-ins at UCSF with our core sites, and these core sites are the high traffic sites consistently found throughout the UC system. Some examples include your main campus site, human resources, the library, and for UCSF, our health sites. Quarterly check-ins with each site's web team takes about 30 minutes. We review the 2 Site Improve data points compared to the last quarter, such as the Site Improve accessibility score, and second, the number of PDFs flagged with issues. We update the site's roadmap after reviewing the data points and offer guidance, and we keep it simple. We like to say, take baby steps. Last year, UCSF made a concentrated effort to reduce bad PDFs. These are flagged with errors, and Site Improve kept flagging the same issues over and over again at our campus. We created a bundled, bite-sized training path to help remedy this with our friends from IT and HR's Learning and Organizational Development. They created a collection of short skill building videos, articles, and tools on how to remediate PDFs and how to bake accessibility in the next time. And last fall, our Accessibility is Me video campaign was launched, where UCSF colleagues share their digital accessibility awareness journey and favorite resources in 2 to 3 minutes. Thanks for letting me share. Back to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Jill. That's a great program, and I know that Jill is more than willing to share with anybody else out there who wants those resources. Jim, what are you doing at UC Santa Cruz?
Thanks, Lucy. We have a common interest group known as the Accessible Technology Committee. And so just a shout out to all the dedicated people who go to those monthly meetings really across the UC system. We also recently hired 2 new ADA compliance officers last July, and they're making a lot of positive, having a positive impact. And we're dealing with the Title II rule change that makes WCAG 2.1 AA the law of the land. And of course, our system-wide policy is being revised this year as well. So that will result in a lot of positive change too. We see increasing demand for services across all the support providers and also changing expectations. Recently, a local report from a group of faculty with disabilities was submitted to campus leadership. And in that report, they described their experiences and made some recommendations. We deployed a report and accessibility barrier form last fall, and that is at the bottom of all of our UCSC web pages now. And the info we receive helps us to better understand people's needs, quickly react to urgent items, and it also allows people to make suggestions so it can serve as a sort of a pressure release, and we can proactively head off simmering concerns.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. And Suzanne, what are you doing here at home at Berkeley?
Thank you, Lucy. Well, actually on Global Accessibility Awareness Day 1 year ago, Berkeley launched our digital accessibility program. This program is responsible for the implementation of both the consent decree with the U.S. Department of Justice and the UCIT accessibility policy. So over the last year, the program team has been quite productive. I'll highlight 2 main areas. They are first the accessibility of web content, and as well as the accessibility assessment of digital products, either those developed in-house or procured. So our consent decree work focuses on 3 main areas: berkeley.edu websites and subdomains, audio on platforms like Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud, and then video on platforms like YouTube and Vimeo. So in order to support accessibility in these areas, the Digital Accessibility Program has focused on 7 key strategies. First, we've developed web accessibility procedures, as well as community practices for digital accessibility. And these provide guidance and details of our obligations and our requirements. Second, we've produced and developed hands-on workshops, training, and as well as documentation and digital resources that provide just-in-time and how-to guidance and techniques for creating and remediating accessible digital content. Third, we have done a lot of work around YouTube. For YouTube, we have created a local opt-in network that is integrated with our 3Play media service provider. So if folks join our network, then Berkeley will process and pay for the captioning of video within a 2-year period from 2020 to 2022. Fourth, we've provided and continue to provide consultation appointments and office hours with our team of digital accessibility experts. So web content owners and then contributors, they can come, ask questions, get one-on-one support really around their specific needs and questions. Fifth, we have created an inventory of our web assets that include berkeley.edu websites, YouTube and Vimeo channels and videos, and then podcast channels and episodes. Sixth, we've implemented service management practices with SiteImprove, which is our automated testing and monitoring solution. And we continue to improve and mature these automated testing and monitoring services and support. as well as fine-tune Site Improve's features and applications as they relate to the goals we have around automated testing, detailed remediation support and guidance, and ongoing monitoring of websites within our Site Improve application. And finally, we have done a lot of work around manual and automated testing reporting. And so to date, the team has completed over 90 individual website assessment reports. These are for our highest prioritized websites. And these assessment reports include results from both automated testing and manual testing. So you can learn more about all that we're doing and what I've mentioned on our website, dap.berkeley.edu. And I'll just quickly mention, while the consent decree work has been our priority, we've had to prioritize it. We are also assessing and monitoring digital products that are being both procured and developed. So this has included products and applications developed at Berkeley and then across the system. Our review approach includes analysis of VPAT or ACR, accessibility conformance reports, and then testing and reviewing of those products or applications. We are currently actively revamping our processes and procedures around this and in this area and determining how to best resource these efforts.
Thank you, Suzanne. That's a lot to be doing there. Andrew. Andrew, you're last, but you're definitely not least. Please let us know what Irvine is doing.
Thank you, Lucy. I am proud to be a member of the UCI IT Accessibility Work Group, which is a group of staff and faculty, and we focus on education and outreach efforts about digital accessibility to both the UCI campus and the UCI health system. And I wanted to highlight two big accomplishments we've made. The first one is manual testing. So we have contracted with Site Improve to manually test the web pages of a few volunteer departments. Those departments have agreed to address any issues that come up during those reports. The great thing about that project is that each department gets a one-on-one session with Site Improve. So not only do they learn how to fix their web page, they learn all kinds of digital accessibility best practices. We will be publishing a report to the campus with these best practices. The other thing that we've done is the accessibility trees program, and credit for that goes to Meredith Ehrenberg, Tompong Eno, and Fanny Tsai. And that is a nationally recognized program where you can earn digital badges by doing activities online. So in those activities, as you get farther along the tree, go from just learning about accessibility to actually increasing accessibility at UCI, hence accessibility treats, because we are growing digital accessibility organically together. And stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Andrew. And I love your tree badging methodology. Meredith did a great job with that project. Next question, and this is really quick, everyone, because we're getting short on time, but please let us know what each of you are doing for training on your campuses. Jim?
All right. Our Teaching and Learning Center provides universal design for learning training to faculty. And we also use the system-wide modules from Site Improve on accessibility training. And that has been incorporated into our staff learning management system as well. We're rolling out WordPress, and we're using a new model where training on accessibility is provided, and there's a pre-launch review of the websites before they go live. That's been really well received, and thanks to Adam Hilsmeyer for that at UC Santa Cruz. Demand for training is there, but we need to find ways to meet that growing demand. And to that end, we've engaged Access for All to conduct an external assessment of our digital accessibility support provision at UCSC, and that's a Cal USource agreement in case any of you are interested. That's out there on Cal USource. And based on their recommendations, we'll chart out additional progress in digital accessibility for the future. But what we're hearing so far is it's about more tools. It's about having that training, and it's about being able to do testing. And all of those three need to be founded on a support structure to help people use the tools, engage in the testing, and take action once they receive training.
Excellent. And Jill?
All right, at UCSF, I've been hosting digital accessibility office hours monthly since 2018. And this encourages our staff to carve out time to continuously monitor their site because accessibility is not a one and done. In July of 2022, I was able to get some funding and I brought back another monthly session that's called Testing Websites with Users with Disabilities. It had gone on hiatus during the pandemic and it's back now. And we feature a different UCSF website every month. A screen reader user shares their experience as they navigate through the site. And these 90-minute sessions are twofold. First, to create awareness of assistive technology and the user's experience. We've had some people that don't even know what a screen reader is until they come to this. And second, to provide discovery opportunities. Using humans to test typically will find more barriers to digital content than automated testing. And the session also reveals usability issues for all users. Last year, we beefed up our training for manual testing. Content editors and developers need to do both automated and manual testing to get the true picture of the accessibility of their site. So thank you, Lucy, for leading one of those live workshops with us that we opened up to the entire UC community. And we post those online and people love the recordings. The learners find it's very helpful to start and stop the sessions as they work on their own site and learn these techniques. And finally, today, we're going to continue to celebrate Global Accessibility Awareness Day at UCSF. We're hosting a taco spread at our hybrid lunch and learn event, and two of my colleagues join me and we'll be presenting a full session on accessible PowerPoint for our on-site and virtual audience at noon today.
Thank you, Jill. And I'm sorry, everybody, I went out of order. Suzanne, you're next.
Thank you, Lucy. As I mentioned, we've developed and deployed asynchronous training, hands-on workshops, and then digital training resources. Really, our approach has been to educate our community on digital accessibility by highlighting the universal concepts that are focused in the following areas: color with use and contrast, headings, images, links, keyboard-only access, lists, plain language, graphs, charts, and complex images, tables, captions, and finally transcripts. We've also developed and deployed an annually required web accessibility procedures training, and this is housed in UC Learn's LMS. And we assign, through HR, this training is assigned to the majority of Berkeley employees. And we've seen great response with that. Additionally, we've created manual testing templates. Super proud of these. And they provide guidance for web editors and for web designers and developers. And our community can just download these templates and begin using them immediately. Finally, we've developed essential site improve guidance and are continuing to build this area of focus out for our community. And in addition, we've provided additional guidance for browser extension tools like Wave.
Excellent. That's really good resources. And Andrew, what are you doing?
Just really quick, we are developing an asynchronous procurement accessibility training module that will be a resource for both our procurement department and the folks who do departmental buying, and it will give them some consideration to take into account with each and every purchase that they review. And, and this will be available for as long as UCSC lasts. So we are taking the lead in accessible product review.
That's fantastic, because we all know that the products we purchase are only as accessible as we try and purchase them. So that's amazing. All right, you now each have 30 seconds to tell everyone what's one accessibility takeaway. You know, the one thing you wish somebody had told you about accessibility before you got started. And Andrew, we'll start with you.
Accessibility is a journey, not a destination. Meaning you will constantly be improving and learning to make things as inclusive as possible. And mistakes are an okay part of the learning experience, as long as you're honest with them and improve.
That's really insightful words. Suzanne, what's your one takeaway?
Oh, Lucy, we just get one. So I'll just invite everyone to consider the investing time and effort into discovering your asset inventory and ownership. So I think it's quite impossible to effectively improve digital accessibility if you don't know the universe of web content, their developers, their designers, and contributors. So we spend a substantial amount of time discovering those digital assets and then cleaning and sorting massive amounts of data for relevancy and accuracy. And we've been able to organize these assets by departments and divisions and correlate them with individual developers, designers, and editors who contribute to these assets. And I think this has really helped us provide targeted support, reporting, guidance directly to contributors and their leadership. Additionally, I think this is going to help us as we mature this process, make really good decisions based on actual data, and then integrate that and make it more automated so that we can have really reliable just-in-time reporting. I'll just throw one more thing in. I do think that the investment in calibration of Site Improve is really essential. I think it's worth the time and energy and will pay off. I think Site Improve is a very powerful tool. I liken it to like a telescope that's revealing information about our universe of websites. And I think really it needs to be continuously fine-tuned and calibrated to give us the most clear picture. You know, automated testing is not an end-all be-all, and it's just a portion of knowing your accessibility, your website's health. But I think it's a really powerful tool for giving agency to website owners and contributors so that they can quickly see what's going on and the issues, and then they're given detailed guidance on how to remediate that. So thank you for letting me squeeze in another one.
Thank you, Suzanne. No, that's awesome. And the fact that you talk about governance of sites is really key. I can't see how many times I've said we have to have governance before we can do anything. So, Jill.
All right, I'll keep mine short and sweet. Please make accessibility a priority and an ongoing practice. And do it because we all love somebody with a disability.
Wow, excellent. Jim, you get the
Yes.
last word.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll end it with system-wide collaboration as my big takeaway. I think when we really benefit from our connection to each other, when we share expertise and resources, when we share recent product testing results and info on costs and staffing levels, it all helps us to create digital experiences that are barrier-free. And the user experience is just better. And because this helps everyone, that means we're able to improve UC student success, attract faculty to teach and do research here, and create the kind of culture where we acknowledge people for who they are, allow them to show up as themselves, and celebrate those moments when they're able to express who they are and fully participate.
Thank you, Jim. When it comes to system-wide collaboration, you've been there from the beginning, and we really appreciate you. So
Thank you.
on that note, I want to let everyone know that the title of this seminar, The Puzzle Pieces, is why we're showing you just a small bit of the puzzle for UC. What puzzle pieces can you bring to the table? Let's continue the conversation. And on that note, I'm going to hand it off to Jill for the next session.
Thank you, Lucy. I will take a moment to get the screen share going. Can I get a verbal confirmation if you're seeing just my slides?
Looks good.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Jill Walters from UCSF. I'm the Digital Accessibility Program Manager there, and happy to be here at Global Accessibility Awareness Days. My presentation is on accessible PowerPoint tips, and a little bit about me. I'm an IT staff person. I'm not an instructional designer. The space that I work in of accessibility is for public-facing websites. The good news is that the basic tenets of website accessibility apply to PowerPoint accessibility. I use PowerPoint myself for a lot of socialization, governance meetings, business meetings, program reporting. I do not use PowerPoint in the classroom. For that level of consideration, please reach out to your department's instructional designer team or design team. Better yet, stick around for the next presenter's topic, which will be accessibility in the classroom. There is, we will be sharing all of our resources later when we provide the video for you. So my takeaway tips for PowerPoint are short and sweet. We're going to talk about presenting with accessibility in mind, creating accessible slide decks, checking for accessibility, and identifying some low-hanging fruit. Let's start with some tips for presenting. I am showing on my screen a presenter of one of my role models, and it's Lainey Feingold. She is a disability rights lawyer in the Bay Area. So if you're in the accessibility space, you might be familiar with her or her books or her public speaking. She is the author of Structured Negotiation, and she is a polished public speaker. Her topics are near and dear to all of our hearts, and about human rights and people with disability. And she embodies the following tips. She always is considering people who are colorblind or have low vision. I like how she describes her slides. You know, she'll say, I'm showing visuals that are dolphins because they are great communicators. So she describes what she's showing on the screen and keeping in mind those people that can't see it. Also making good color choices for graphs and charts, not having a wall of text on the slide. Lucy always says, please read me everything that's on the slide. So we don't want a wall of text, but we do want to make sure that we don't leave anything out that the sighted folks might see on the screen, but other people might not be able to hear. This number 3, this is for me, speak slowly, take pauses. We have ASL interpreters trying to keep up with us and cart service. And also taking pauses will help your audience digest the information. Working with a buddy system beforehand is great for proofing your work and for also practicing your timing and to get some constructive constructive criticism. And I wanted to mention this because somebody mentioned it to me during a live session where we were all in a room. And she said when the window coverings are closed and the lights are dim, it provides a higher contrast for her with her specific vision impairments. So just wanted to keep that in mind to make sure that there's enough contrast in the room if you have control over that. On to some tips for creating slide decks. Use pre-built accessible templates. If someone gives you a template and they say it's accessible, you might want to double check that, and then keep checking as you create your slide deck. So one simple thing that's easy to do is give every slide deck a title and each slide a title. So to give a slide a title, that's when you're in the accessibility checker mode. I have a screenshot on my slide showing a little button that says slide title, where you can set a title, and you can also actually add a hidden slide title. So the title might be hidden for the visual person, but it will be there for the screen reader person. And then fourth, work in the desktop mode versus the web version of PowerPoint. You'll have a less frustrating experience, and you'll have a more feature-rich experience too. And limit the amount of text on your slides. Try using phrases, using lists. Those are all very helpful. And then tips for visuals. I have a screenshot showing the alt text box that is in PowerPoint, and a little bit about visuals. You might want to use them to enhance your main idea. If your visuals contain important information, of course, you'll want to add alt text. And if it doesn't, you can mark your image as decorative. And those can be done in the alt text box that I'm displaying on here. You can either add some alt text content. They recommend 1 to 2 detailed sentences, or there is a check box where you can mark it as decorative. So it's a subjective thing. Keep your content strategy in mind, and that will guide you with what to do with your images. And then another one, the last tip for visuals is avoid motion or animations. I've been at conferences where you're waiting for everything to start and there's a logo on the screen and it's rotating and rotating, and it's, it drives me crazy, but it can induce other things, maybe for people with vestibular issues or ADHD. So try and avoid those animations that go on over and over again. And I would say also avoid the animations from slide to slide in your PowerPoint. Also keep visuals in mind. It's not just your images, it's your smart charts, smart art, your charts. All these objects are going to need the decision whether you apply alt text or mark it as decorative. And one last tip is, if you have lots of images on your slide, group them together in a way that makes sense, and then you only have to write alt text about that group of images, and that would probably make more sense to your users anyway. Next is tips for evaluating accessibility. Inside PowerPoint, there is a built-in accessibility checker that you can launch. Typically, it's under the review menu. You go into check for accessibility, and it's going to bring up a panel for accessibility, and issues are prioritized by errors, warnings, and then intelligent services. So intelligent services, that's when PowerPoint writes an alt text for you. And I would say make sure you always look at what it writes for you. It might be written well, but it also might say a little note like written with low confidence or written with high confidence. And you at least want to strip that part out, and you really want to check what it puts in there for you. What's nice about this panel is there's steps to fix, how to go in and make the change, and it runs in real time. So once you fix something, you'll see your list of accessibility issues start to shrink down. And then they go away when everything is addressed. Some more tips for evaluating is the reading order pane. If you're under your accessibility checker and then you go to the selection pane, it's going to show you all the elements from your PowerPoint and what order they will be read in. And you just simply drag and drop them into the right order. Like right now, I am on a Mac, and the reading order on my Mac is that the title is usually always at the bottom of the stack. And then I usually push my footer and my lower content to the top and all my good stuff in the middle. So it's going to read in the order that it has in that pane to the person that's a screen reader user. So you don't want them to hear like stuff from the footer before they even hear the title. So there's also 2 resources on here. One is from Microsoft, and the title is called Make Your PowerPoint Presentations Accessible to People with Disabilities. And there's another one from WebAIM. We all love WebAIM. They have one called WebAIM Word and PowerPoint Accessibility Evaluation Guide. And I highly recommend that for beginners. These are all really great guides. And then finally, some tips to identify low-hanging fruits. So these would be your quick wins, something that's easy to fix, give you a sense of accomplishment. I had already mentioned adding the slide titles. Second thing would be to trim your text to short phrases and bullet points. Third, remove animations and motion. Fourth, mark your decorative images. And fifth, check your reading order. That is all I have for you today. I hope this was just a quick view of tips and tricks to share with you for PowerPoint, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and get my presentation shared for you all. All right, can I get verbal confirmation? Everyone can see that?
Verbal confirmation.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you, I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to talk today briefly about accessibility in the classroom. My name is Rachel Lee Bellafato, and I am a director of our Academic and Campus Technology Support Unit. So I oversee our classroom technology stack as well as our Instructional Design Center, which is really where this presentation rests. So I want to talk a little bit about 2 things. There's universal design for learning, which is a way of designing instruction with multiple ways of learning to suit all students, recognizing their differences. Then there's, of course, accessibility, which generally is designing environments, services, products, tools, really anything to ensure usability by those with disabilities, either directly or through the use of assistive technologies. My interest, and what I'm really going to talk about today, is the overlap of UDL and accessibility, where I like to think of as meeting every student where they are. The easiest example I have to describe this is captions. So from an accessibility standpoint, we know that captions are key to making sure that those who have hearing loss are able to understand the content being delivered. But research also shows us that captions increase retention and comprehension for many learners, which is the universal design of learning side of the house. So if you are an instructor and you are providing captions, you're not only ensuring that your learning content is accessible, but you're also ensuring that's inclusive. And that's this intersection that I'm talking about. All right. However, let me talk real quickly about the things that I'm not going to cover in this presentation, not because they're not important. In fact, these are very critical things, but if I went into any depth about all of these, this presentation would be probably 2 hours long. So I'm not going to talk about syllabi language for accessibility or how to manage accommodation requests. Definitely not going to go in depth about universal design for learning. And I'm not going to really go into the tools that are available out there for accessibility analysis and remediation. So let's talk about what we are going to talk about. So accessibility in the classroom really is more than just fulfilling accommodation requests. As important as those are and how serious they need to be in order to remove barriers for our students with disabilities, not every student can get one. Some students are not granted them for various reasons that they can or can't control. For example, getting the proper medical documentation. Some students aren't willing to go get one because they don't want to be spotlighted or seen. So just fulfilling accommodation requests isn't ensuring that your classroom is accessible. The other thing is that accessibility isn't one size fits all. There are many, many types of disabilities, and the nature of disabilities is varied. So we can't just check box a few things and say that we've made our classroom completely accessible. I would also like to say that I feel that accessibility is a practice of inclusivity. When you make a class accessible, you benefit all students in some way, not just those with disability. And it allows your students who might have disabilities but don't want them called out to be able to partake without feeling singled out or stigmatized. So these are the quick tips I'm going to go over today. Talking about designing accessible slides, following up from Jill, and then also why I recommend using digital presentations over whiteboards or chalkboards when you're in a physical space. The same as using microphones when they are provided. And then last, how to seek out guidance on your campus for accessibility. Okay, for the components of a good slide, we've just heard from Jill about PowerPoint, and she's gone over all of these, so I'm going to go really quickly through it. But make sure that you're using appropriate contrast, that your text is concise. You don't have a whole wall of text. That creates cognitive issues. When you have diagrams and pictures, they should be relevant to what you're talking about on your slide. This is good for people who might not be able to see those diagrams and pictures, as well as just general cognitive practice that helps learners learn. Keep your text large, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail later about how helpful this can be. Of course, in all cases in which you are using images, please provide alt text, and in all cases in which you're providing audio content, please provide captions. The other thing, make sure your slides have structure elements. There's a lot. That's slide titles. That's making sure headings are in there, bulleted lists, setting reading order. Everything in here is important to make sure that screen readers can go through the slides as well as providing accessible alternative formats. Okay, so now let's talk about actually being in the classroom. This is my example lecture hall. It's ACS 120. It seats nearly 300 students at UC Merced. On the wall is what's called a direct LED wall that's capable of showing 2 large images simultaneously. Below that is your standard whiteboard. Also provided to faculty teaching in this space are a place to plug in their laptops and what's called a document camera or visual presenter, which is just our fancy digital way of doing old school overhead projectors. The whiteboards are lighted and we provide microphones in this hall. Okay, so now I'm going to step back a second. ADA doesn't actually cover what happens when you are presenting a digital presentation in a physical space. What ADA does cover is what physical signs should have as a requirement, and as well what your digital content should be when delivered in a digital medium. What I'm going to try to do is marry these two things. So we don't have to read everything on here, but what ADA has for permanent signs, such as those that you see in an airport directing you to a gate, is a minimum size that your text height should be depending on how far above your head the sign is and how far away from the sign you're likely to be viewing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these sign requirements and I'm going to apply them to this lecture hall that we just looked at. So I've got a roughly put together, not to scale diagram here, but as you saw, the room was sloped, the instructor's at the front. The whiteboard is 8 feet off the ground. It's 4 feet tall itself. And the screen is almost 15 feet tall. The front row of students sit roughly 27 feet away from that screen, and the back row sit a whopping 90 feet away from the screen. So if we take those measurements and we do the math to apply it to the ADA sign requirements, in order for text to be considered minimally visible, the minimal character height for those seating in the front row needs to be 3.75 inches. For those in the back row, it needs to be 10.5 inches. So let me show you what that looks like. If we're talking about how large text needs to be, the first thing we're going to assume is that we care about our students in the back row. So that means that front measurement is kind of meaningless. We need to make our text 10.5 inches high to be visible. If I write on the whiteboard, that means my text has to be as high as 22% of the board height. And if I'm putting it on that large screen, it's got to be roughly 6% of that screen height. I did a lot of messing around because it's kind of hard to do the direct math, but that means the minimum font size I have to use in PowerPoint to accomplish this goal for the back row is 48. To give you a comparison right now, I didn't even follow these rules. My smallest text size on this slide is 36 points, so it would not be considered visible on that screen to the back row students. All right, now let me show you what this actually looks like. So I'm sitting here in the front row and I've taken a picture of what it looks like when I write on that document camera or visual presenter and what it looks like when I write on the whiteboard. The visual presenter is fairly decently seen. On the whiteboard, that writing is actually 10.5 inches tall. I measured it. And I wrote in four colors: red, green, blue, and black. Even from the front row, that's not particularly easy to see. Also, as pointed out by my colleague Lucy here, ADA also requires a minimum stroke thickness. The minimum stroke thickness must be 30% the height of the character, or a minimum of 10%. That means with that 10.5 inch tall whiteboard writing that I'm writing, I would have to make the thickness of my letters 1.5 inches. I don't think any of us are doing this because, for comparison, a chisel whiteboard marker that most of us use is only 1/5 of an inch wide. So I'm not meeting the requirements even for the front row. But now let's look at the back row, which has a cameo with me standing at the front. I don't know about you guys, and depending on your screens, this might not be good, but I cannot read the writing on the whiteboard. And this is why my recommendation in physical classrooms is to use your digital presentations as much as possible. Whiteboards, both due to contrast and due to size, just tend to be not accessible for students. Same with chalkboards. All right, so now let's talk about this next part. What about loudness? When you are in a classroom and a microphone is provided, I always recommend using the microphone. In this same room, this lecture hall, I took some measurements. The background noise measurement was roughly 40 decibels loud. The minimal loudness that is set for using assistive listed devices by the ADA is 60 decibels. So I took some measurements. Without my microphone at the front row, speaking normally, the minimum was about 54 decibels. Speaking as loud as my friend could, my colleague, was 61 decibels. So just barely meeting that minimum set by the ADA. The back row, it was only 46 to 54 decibels, which means I'm not meeting the minimum loudness as set by the ADA, even when I had several male colleagues speak as loud as they could to shout to the back of the room. However, in both cases with the microphone, it was about 70 decibels, which means that you could be heard and you were loud. And just to sort of make this point even more, decibel is not a linear scale, it's a logarithmic scale. So if I'm talking and I'm only doing about 40 to 50 decibels, that's roughly 1/6 of the loudness of the 70 decibels that are provided with the microphone. So it's actually much, much quieter. So if you are in a facility that provides a microphone, definitely use it so you can be heard. If you have a student using an assistive listening device, generally you have to use the microphone because that's the system that provides the audio to those students. All right, lastly, just really quickly, this is not all inclusive, but there is a lot to accessibility. So my last recommendation is to find campus resources. Check in with your student accessibility offices, as these oversee providing the accommodations and generally necessary tools to the students who need them. Check and see if you have a digital accessibility program. So these are the ones that are generally concerned with your learning management system content, with your websites, how you provide information online. Also, look into your teaching and learning centers. This is generally where you will find instructional designers who are going to help you with universal design for learning, who will help you make sure that your course content you've made is accessible. And then also your ADA coordinators for the campuses are generally great resources for finding out any information about ADA and its requirements. Again, not an exhaustive list, but I find that these are good places to start to branch out for your individual campuses and find out what services, resources, and tools are available for you. All right, that concludes my quick run through of accessibility in the classroom. So joining us next will be Brian McNeely, who's going to talk about leading laterally.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm Brian McNeely. and my presentation here is going to be on leading laterally. As I think we've heard from a lot of our presenters today, accessibility really is a part of the UC mission. And this presentation is going to be a bit about how you, wherever you are kind of within the structure of the university or wherever you work, if you aren't here in UC, can impact change and promote accessibility. So briefly a bit about me. I, as Judy mentioned earlier, am in the Office of the President. Under that, I'm under the UC operations, within the Information Technology Services Department, beneath the Office of the CIO, under the Directorate of Applications, under the Application Engineering team, specifically on the web support team, and then there's me. So I really am kind of nested very, very deeply. I imagine many of you who work in UC are also similarly really, really kind of far down this chain of hierarchy, and you might be saying, great, this accessibility thing sounds awesome. I want to help implement this, but it's just me. What can I do? And so sort of this might beg the question, what does this description that I just gave have to do with accessibility? And maybe if you're already kind of in that position, you might be kind of guessing. And so really what we want to think about here is, how do we promote accessibility? How do we go and take accessibility from just being kind of a part of compliance to being and practicing inclusivity and going beyond the letter of our existing UC policy to make sure that we have an environment that's available to everyone UC serves. As we've kind of heard previously, and I think this is great advice, first up, really, it's important to kind of deepen your understanding of accessibility. As all of our panelists earlier mentioned, as Jill and Rachel mentioned, there are a ton of resources on campus, wherever you are, about accessibility. So learn as much as you can, attend trainings and events. I will second the value of any sort of office hours or direct resources you can have and find around that, and just create a baseline level of knowledge for whatever it is you work in. At this point in time, basically everyone deals in some capacity with digital content, and there is an accessibility component of any of that. And most of these things are very transferable in terms of designing PowerPoints, Word documents, PDFs, that sort of thing. And there's definitely resources available. And related is kind of know who you can turn to, because even if you have developed a great depth of knowledge for something that you deal with day in and day out, there's always going to be something new that's going to come across your desk. And I believe it was Andrew said, accessibility is a journey, not a static point. And there's always more room to grow. I guarantee you all of these panelists and everyone who's spoken already has had those moments where you realize you're just kind of out of your wheelhouse and you need to find an additional resource. But there are lots of folks at the Electronic Accessibility Committee, et cetera, who have probably dealt with whatever you're dealing with. So kind of once you've got that baseline level of knowledge for whatever it is you do, kind of where do you go from there? And this is where I like to refer to kind of finding and knowing your power. No matter what we do, we always have some sort of leverage or the ability to go and influence others within our work. So examples of this are kind of like publishing or reviewing. If someone sends you a draft of anything that they're working on, make sure that you go and check it for accessibility. Make sure that you know kind of what that looks like, an accessible document. And then if you notice an accessibility issue, say, hey, look, we have this existing policy at UC, and we can't move forward with this until we've fixed these errors. Another example is if you're kind of more on the IT side of things, make sure that anytime someone talks about a new piece of software, if someone's designing any sort of digital content, check those things for accessibility. Anywhere in which someone is having you take a look at something, make sure that you're thinking about accessibility and building it in mind. The second bullet point here is what I like to call promoting a little bit of healthy competition. I once had a friend who was in the private sector, and he was saying, hey, my company is so small, we don't have any sort of accessibility policy. It doesn't exist yet. But what I have noticed is we have competitors in the marketplace, and I can really get some traction by saying, hey, I happen to notice this other company. They're doing accessibility way better than us. Like, we think that we should be able to be beating them in any number of things. How maybe this is kind of a way to promote a little healthy rivalry and kind of build accessibility and push it forward. And that's applicable just about anywhere, because anytime we're kind of promoting this, well, other folks are beating us around this issue that we really care about and think we should be the best at. That's just going to benefit everyone. And lastly, I just want to talk about kind of pushing accessibility left. So the idea here is, I believe Jill mentioned that we kind of want to build things with accessibility in mind. And the earlier in the process that we go and begin thinking about and promoting accessibility, the easier these things become to fix, resolve, and then we don't end up with a situation that happens far too often where things are done, and right before they are supposed to be done and completed, someone says, hey, now's our time to only now think about accessibility. And so then we have to go back, undo a lot of work that's previously been done, and that causes delays, that causes frustration. And so anywhere we can kind of find ways to insert and think about accessibility and move that forward earlier, we're just going to have a easier, better time and create a more inclusive space at UC. So once you've kind of got these two strategies in place, I really recommend, helping to build a team, connect with others, whether that's folks on campus who are already passionate about accessibility, or even your colleagues who you've noticed have been receptive to your comments around accessibility. Oftentimes, I know from personal experience, there are people who continually submit requests to us, and as a part of talking with them about accessibility and seeing some of these patterns that keep coming back over and over and over again, they learn about what are common pain points around accessibility, and then they can become experts on their teams in their departments around accessibility, and kind of then spread and distribute this knowledge across departments, across locations, across the entire system. And that's just a great way that we can go and really distribute out this knowledge, because accessibility shouldn't be something where it's locked away, where there's only a couple people who are experts. We need to really push this out, because the output of the entire UC system is truly massive. There's just so much that gets created in every location, department, team, everywhere. And so it can't just be one person's area of expertise. We need to really distribute this knowledge and create a robust structure to kind of move beyond compliance. And now I will say, and I believe Lucy mentioned this earlier, while this is great, putting this knowledge out there is amazing, this isn't the end all be all. There's no substitute for having dedicated policy that goes and ensures that we have compliance from the top down. However, promoting accessibility and kind of leading laterally from this place of who you know, who you work with day in, day out, is going to ensure that we create the most accessible experience for everyone system-wide. That's it for me. And so I am going to pass it over to Anne.
Hi, everyone. This is Anne Y. Kwong, she, her. And thank you so much, Brian, for the insights you've shared around how to make this work less daunting when you might be the only one on the team working on accessibility. Today, I wanted to share some perspectives around busting the glass ceiling of digital inaccessibility. So what happens when content is inaccessible? And what are the large-scale, both personal as well as systemic impacts to the disability community when one encounters inaccessible digital content? I wanted to share a little bit about myself and why this topic is particularly relevant to my work as well as my personal life. I identify proudly as a blind professional, and I'm also the current coordinator, one of the coordinators of our Disability Cultural Community Center at the UC Berkeley campus. For those of you who are wondering, what is a Disability Cultural Community Center? Well, it's really a space to celebrate and include disabled community members, faculty, students, and staff as part of the vibrant community on our UC campus. And it's really to go back to what many speakers have shared. We want to go beyond compliance. And the Disability Cultural Community Center is really focused on building community and also spreading awareness and celebrating the value disabled folks bring to the campus community and society at large. There's currently only about 18 cultural centers in higher education, and UC Berkeley is the first and hopefully not the last UC to have this space for our community members. So I wanted to also share why this matters to me personally. Blank, blank, blank. Those are some of the frustrating sounds I hear when I personally use a screen reader to access content, whether it be sometimes on the web or sometimes on platforms that are inaccessible to assistive and adaptive technology. Approximately 30% of the UC Berkeley combined campus community, so that's students, postdocs, faculty, and staff such as myself, identify as disabled on the Berkeley campus. So this frustrating barrier of encountering inaccessible content is not unique to my situation, unfortunately. And when we encounter inaccessible content, this really limits the opportunities of folks with disabilities and the potential of them to excel in the workplace, in school, or in any other social spaces as well. Because as we know, the college experience and work life is all about balance, and students and faculty and staff not only come here to use digital platforms for education and information, but also for connection, community, and fun as well, as we'll be learning about later. So in addition, really ensuring that platforms are accessible needs to, as many folks have shared, be from a foundational discussion before we procure technology, having that check of accessible content. Is that platform usable and also able to be accessed with a screen reader or any other adaptive and accessible technology? Oftentimes, what really frustrates a lot of folks too is platforms are usable from the front end, the public facing end, but not so from the administrative or back end. And this really is also putting a lot of talent, folks with disabilities who are great talent, at a disadvantage. They aren't able to be developers, or if a platform which handles timesheets is inaccessible, how can they be promoted to become supervisors and manage staff who are also using these platforms? So really having inaccessible content creates this unfortunate glass ceiling, barring the potential of folks and also barring upward mobility. I wanted to leave folks with some last thoughts before I conclude around why it is really important, and it takes each and every one of us to really work toward inclusion and change the culture on how we can ensure that content for public, for staff, for students and faculty are all accessible. Right. So some of these thoughts include, if folks with disabilities is truly considered a part of the broader human diversity, how should access and inclusion be discussed? Should it really only fall upon the disability community to push it, or does everyone, whether disabled or not, have the responsibility to do so? What is the role each and every one of you all have in busting through this digital glass ceiling of inaccessibility? And again, we need to work together collaboratively to break through this glass ceiling of digital inaccessibility, especially again with the recent announcement of the DOJ ruling, and also looking at procurement and deployment of inaccessible technology and platforms as that harmful limiting barrier, because we want to make sure that things are accessible and all folks' viewpoints are welcome, their talents brought in, and that we can truly have an inclusive, vibrant educational space and workforce. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass it off to Lucy Greco to discuss and share and demonstrate for us that accessibility can also be fun, and folks with disabilities also should have accessible social spaces for them to connect and have fun.
Thank you, Anne. I always love hearing you speak because you're always so clear in what you say. So it's really important to get the work stuff, the educational content and all that accessible. It's key, it's critical. You know, somebody mentioned today that you have to have a banking site that might be accessible. You know, we talked about our PowerPoints, but we are human beings, and human beings, you know, at our basic level are social creatures. And if we don't have social experiences that are accessible, we're leaving people out of the thing that makes us basically human, the ability to socialize and recognize each other and, you know, make friends and do all the rest of it. In 2010, the FCC created a rulemaking to say that any kind of communications technology needed to be accessible to people with disabilities. And in this rulemaking, it became very clear all of a sudden that video games needed to comply because they had communications mechanisms in there. This is where, you know, people were doing live chat and communicating with each other during games, and multi-online platforms where, you know, thousands of people around the world were communicating. Well, it turned out they weren't accessible, but they had to be accessible. This law made it so that they had to be accessible. So the video game companies immediately kind of stepped up because they had to and made their chats accessible. And they did a couple of more things, like also maybe including the font size of the chat. And what they realized was as soon as they provided accessibility features and functionality, everyone was using them. Like, for example, captions. Well, the majority of gamers, it turns out, are women in their 40s. And women in their 40s, a lot of us have kids. And if those kids are sleeping, you can't really well have your video game blasting at top volume. Or a lot of people now want to sit back on the sofa and watch the video game or play, you know, watch TV. Well, we have to have the font large enough for people to be able to see it. And also those, you know, women in their 40s, their vision is starting to get dimmer because we spent our entire lives on screens. So today I'm going to demonstrate Stardew Valley. It's a farm sim, as Judy said. And what that means is I am a character and I have just been given a farm and I have to progress this farm. This is not accessible by default out of the box. But one of the reasons I chose this one is because it is a game that was adapted and changed and built upon by blind people. There is a community of blind modders or modifiers of the game. And these blind modders made their own adaptations and changes to the game to make it accessible. So if you'll give me a moment, I've been fighting with the new Zoom to always do the right screen sharing. So just give me a second here.
You have started screen share.
And you should now see my game.
Stardew Valley 1.6. Stardew Valley 1.6.
So I'm going to maximize
Farmhouse
the screen for everybody here. And you'll see I am this little character and I'm laying in bed and I'm in the middle of a farmhouse. Can you all hear my sound as well, by the way? Confirmation from someone?
Yes. Oh,
all right.
Not the game sound.
Not because the game hasn't made me sound yet.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So I know this game very well, but what I'm going to tell you is that there are ways to move around in the game. And mostly people use mice, but when you're blind, you can't use a mouse. So the modders added the ability to use ASDW to move. That is a common recognized movement area keys. A moves left.
Red cottage rug.
and D moves right,
Red cottage rug.
and S moves down. So you'll notice it kept saying red cottage rut because the game is telling me what the surface I am on is, which is really important to know because, you know, if I'm in the winter and it's snow, I'm going to know that I'm in snow, or, you know, it's good to know that I'm on a path versus in the dirt. So they also made it so that I don't have to literally go around looking for objects. I can use what they call the object tracker. So by hitting page up or page down,
Starter gift. End of list.
the starter gift is here. So I found that with the object tracker, and now I can move to it automatically by hitting Control Home.
Red cottage rug. Starter gift is North 1 at 3 to 7. Player at 3 to 8.
So you'll see it said it was North 1 at 3 to 7 and 3 to 8. So I'm going to make sure I'm facing north by hitting W. And I'm going to interact with that by hitting C.
Parsnip seeds. You received 15 parsnip seeds. Here's a little something to get you started. Mayor Lewis.
And it told me what the item was, and it read the note that was included with those items. And those have been added to my inventory. So now I'm going to go out and explore my farm. So I'm going to use my object tracker again. And to change categories in the object tracker, I hit Control page down.
Doors. Farm entrance.
Excellent. And there's doors and the farm entrance. So again, Control Home to move to it.
Moving to farm entrance.
And I'm going to move south because I know that's where the entrance is.
You see farm entered.
Now I'm out on the farm, and you'll see there's nice sound effects. It's giving me ambient noise. There's birds chirping. And I'm going to just walk out into my farm and see what I can find. Okay, there's the porch. I'm still on the porch. Oh, now I'm down out on the dirt.
Small gray stone.
There's a gray stone. So I have to get rid of that stone because we all know that farms shouldn't have stones on them. So there is an inventory bar, and I believe that's visible on the screen, but across the top. So what the game or the modders did was make it so that I can use my numbers 1 through $= on a keyboard to move through my inventory. So if I hit 1, I've got the X.
Watering cancel. Axe selected.
There we go. Sorry, I had to give the computer a kick there. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But I happen to know that the pickaxe, I believe, is in position 5.
Scythe selected.
Oh, nope, that's the scythe.
Pickaxe selected.
There's my pickaxe, so I can just swing at that stone with the letter C.
Drop item. Stone.
There you go. It just said there's a stone there, and that's been put in my inventory. I can keep moving.
Grass.
Oh, listen to this.
Grass.
There's grass. There's walkway. It means I shouldn't be planting on that.
Grass.
I'm going to cut down that grass with my scythe.
Scythe selected.
There's that scythe swinging at the grass. And now I want to plant a seed here.
Hoe selected.
I'm going to use my hoe, hoe the ground.
Soil. Clay.
And I picked up some clay. That's a good bonus there. And then I can actually use my seeds now here.
Stone selected. Clay selected.
We got to find those seeds.
Stone selected. Parsnip seed selected.
Parsnip seed, and I'm going to plant one.
Parsnip.
And I'm going to move one down again.
Grass.
And I'm going to scythe it.
Pickaxe. Scythe selected.
Hoe it.
Hoe selected. Soil.
And then I'm going to plant the seed again.
Stone selected. Parsnip seed selected. Parsnip.
So this is basic mechanics of the game. I use my arrow keys to move around, but let's say I wanted to look for something specific on the farm. So I am going to change categories and see what categories I have.
Interactables. Mailbox.
There's a mailbox.
Other. Artifact spot.
An artifact spot. So I want to go see what that artifact is. I can just move to it.
Small gray stone. Weeds. Weeds.
Oh, I've got a lot of farming to do, don't I?
Grass. Weeds. Weeds. Grass. Oak tree.
Oh.
Grass.
I have a couple trees.
Grass. Artifact spot.
And I know that when I find an artifact spot, I'm supposed to hoe it.
Hoe selected. Soil. Rice shoot.
And I got a bonus seed. I can plant some rice. So that's the basics of the game. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And, remind everyone that social activities are really important. It's, life isn't all work and school. We've got to have fun in our lives. But more importantly, people like to play games nowadays. People do all kinds of things like this. And if blind people can't interact with their peers doing the things that they do, we don't make friends, we don't feel included in society, and we don't actually join our community doing the things they do. And I frankly love gaming because it's a way for me to get out there and meet people from around the world. I mean, the Discord community around this particular game is some really cool blind people. The developers of the mod are amazing people, and they're all blind. And I get to meet these people and talk to them and do all sorts of different things. Oh, and don't forget that if you make your product accessible, and this is not for UC necessarily, but in gaming especially, what they've found is that if you make your product accessible, the people with disabilities are very loyal customers, and they'll keep paying out the money to keep getting the accessibility. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone, and I hope this was a fun demonstration. And I'm going to pass it now to Douglas.
Hello, everyone. All right, so got a little bit of time here to go through the questions submitted into the Q&A module here. First off, just so you know, these are all going to be shared after the webinar, along with the recording and along with all of the resources that were mentioned today by our presenters. So if you didn't have a chance to check out all of the questions and those that are being answered in the Q&A pane, you'll be able to find all of them afterward. All right. I don't think we have any live questions that are unanswered. So really quickly, I'll just go through some of the questions that were asked and share some answers quickly with y'all. One of the most common ones we got are the resources going to be shared? Is the recording going to be shared? Yes, absolutely. We will have these all up on the Electronic Accessibility Committee's website within a few weeks. And actually currently there, you can find recordings of the last 3 years GAD webinars and all of the resources and Q&As and things like that. Okay, Joe asked Jill what PDF accessibility guidelines and standards she was using to evaluate PDFs. Jill mentioned Words Checker, the Adobe Acrobat Checker, and SiteImprove. There was a little continuing conversation about these automated checkers in the QA. I think some folks alluding to the fact that these automated checkers do have some limitations. They're not able to detect every error that might occur with PDF accessibility. They might also occasionally, sometimes falsely flag something as an error that isn't an error. So as you get deeper into PDF accessibility, it is really valuable to learn a little bit about manual checking. And further down in the Q&A, we've got some resources that we shared aimed at that, and we'll be sharing those again in the resources we post to the EAC website afterward. Stephen asks about reasonable accommodations available to staff. Just so you know, all UC staff members can request reasonable accommodations. The process is a little bit different at each location, and it does need to be initiated by the staff member. So just go check with your local HR department. I think if you just do a search for reasonable accommodation, you should find a way to initiate that process. And don't worry, privacy is totally maintained throughout the process. It's a big concern for us. All right, Moshkin asks about accessibility guidelines for website development. I'm going to actually end here with this last question. Again, all the other questions will be answered on the EAC website afterwards. UC's IT accessibility policy adopts the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the Level A and Level AA standards as the accessibility guidelines we should strive to achieve in our web development and with pretty much all of our digital content. So check those out. They were also recently adopted by the Department of Justice as part of that Title II of ADA rule change that we mentioned a few times. If you were going to check out a specific version of WCAG, we recommend 2.1 right now. That's been adopted by the Department of Justice and will soon be adopted by our policy. But you're always encouraged to go above and beyond if you can. So you can also check out 2.2 that was recently released as well. All right, I've got two two new questions, but we're sort of running out of time. So I'm actually going to hand things off to Judy to close us out today. And again, all these questions will be posted afterwards and answered on the EAC website. So here you go. Hi, Judy.
All right, thanks, Doug. Well, that wraps up this year's Global Accessibility Awareness Day webinar. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and we hope you've identified at least one takeaway from the session with our phenomenal speakers, so you can start looking for ways to improve accessibility in what you're doing. We can all do a little bit at a time to improve accessibility. Make your next PowerPoint deck more accessible based on Jill's presentation. If you're an instructor, make the classroom experience more accessible based on Rachel's suggestions. Influence accessibility at your organization based on Brian's experiences. We won't become completely accessible overnight, but if we keep at it and keep pushing accessibility forward, we will have done our parts in making the world just a little bit more inclusive. I had some conferences to share, but we will send that out in an email. If you have any questions, get in touch with your location's representatives on the Electronic Accessibility Committee, or EAC. So as I mentioned, we'll be sharing out a link to the webinar recording and resources in a couple of weeks. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.